Good morning. I'm Susan Sprung, National Executive Director of the Producers Guild. Welcome to our day with the PGA Awards nominees. This is always one of the Guild's most interesting events of the year, and I'm sure today will be no exception. This year, we've been fortunate enough to expand our program to 3 panels. In addition to theatrical motion picture, we'll have panels for documentary motion picture and nonfiction television. And as an added bonus, we're presenting the PGA Awards for Children's Short Form Sports Program, as well as the PGA Innovation Award. It's going to be a busy, exciting day. Before we get started, I'd like to thank some companies and people who help make events like this possible. First, one of our long-standing partners of this event is General Motors, an innovative company at the forefront of creating an all-electric future. GM has been working with producers behind the scenes and on screen since Hollywood's earliest days. We invite you to explore GM as a partner for your upcoming projects. Thank you, GM, for a decade of partnership with the PGA. Thanks as well to our friends at Green Slate. They've been instrumental in helping productions work during the pandemic. Their technology was all digital well before COVID, and they have the only all-in-one app for payroll and accounting. I know nearly half of our theatrical nominees today are already using them. I encourage you to check them out as well. Thank you to the Honolulu Film Office, one of the safest locations in the world. Their skilled crews, stunning views, and tax credits make Honolulu the production center of the tropics. Thank you to Panavision and their post-production services company, Lightiron. From optics and cameras to final color, Panavision and Lightiron provide filmmakers all around the world with cutting-edge end-to-end solutions to power their creative visions. Thanks to Produce Iowa. If you're looking for an authentic experience paired with beautiful locations, Iowa is ready for your story. Thank you, Produce Iowa. Our sincere thanks to our presenting sponsor, The Hollywood Reporter. The Hollywood Reporter has partnered with the PGA on this event from the beginning. We truly appreciate your support of the Guild and the producing community. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce THR's new editorial director, Nikessa Moody.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Susan, and hello, everyone. The Hollywood Reporter is so proud of our longstanding partnership with the PGA. I'd like to thank PGA Presidents Gail Berman and Lucy Fisher for having me here today. It's particularly exciting for me to take part, being that this is my first year as editorial director at the Hollywood Reporter. The Hollywood Reporter supports the PGA in its endeavors to protect its members' interests and to help you all continue to bring your projects to the screen. Congratulations to all the nominees on your outstanding achievements in a year unlike any other. As if you didn't already have enough challenges to overcome getting a project made, you did it during a global pandemic. It's also great to see such a diverse and inclusive group of projects, producers, and panelists represented this year. Thank you for producing exceptional projects that represent the many different aspects of our culture and our humanity. Now let's get on with the show.
Thank you, Nikessa and the Hollywood Reporter. Please join me in welcoming the amazing Lucy Fisher. Lucy is the president of the Producers Guild of America, and today she's going to serve as the moderator of our roundtable with the nominees for the Darryl F. Zanuck Award for Outstanding Producer of Theatrical Motion Picture. Take it away, Lucy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Nikessa and the Hollywood Reporter. What a fantastic collection of movies and producers we have this year. A real bouquet of talent. I'd like to introduce you now. Producers, please wave as I say your name and movie. Monica Levinson, Borat subsequent movie film.
Hi.
Charles D. King, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Hello.
Hi. Todd Black, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Hello.
Ceán Chaffin, Mank. Hello, Ceán. Christina O, Minari.
Hello.
Dan Janvey, Nomadland.
Hi, everyone.
Jess Calder, One Night in Miami. Ashley Fox, Promising Young Woman.
Hello.
Sacha Ben Harroche, Sound of Metal.
Hi, everyone.
Platt. Trial of the Chicago 7.
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
Thanks for being here, everyone. And thanks you audience for being here so early in the morning. And now if we could just roll a clip from each of these great movies, we can begin. Thanks.
Добре, ще го направи. Мисля, че го направи, защото ме обичаш. И то по същия начин, по който можеш да обичаш синовете си.
No. יותר.
You can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom. Hey! Revolutionary! Hey! Revolutionary! Hey! Revolutionary! Let me hear the people beat! Let me hear the people beat!
Levy, what were you doing? Why are you playing all them notes? You playing 10 notes for everyone you're supposed to play. Don't call for all that.
You're supposed to improvise on a theme. That's what I was doing.
You're supposed to play the song like I sing it, the way everybody else play it.
Playing the song, I was playing it the way I felt it.
How can I put this nicely? I may be a loose cannon, but you, my friend, are an outsider. They're exasperated by me, and I've earned it, but you, a self-anointed savior hyphenate, they're just waiting to load you.
Remind me never again to work with a washed-up alcoholic.
Duly noted.
하지마. 그러면 산에서 온 이슬물이나 갖고 와. 그거 마시자. 싫어. 싫어? 이리 와, 이리 와, 이리 와. 아이고, pretty boy, pretty boy, pretty.
I'm not pretty. I'm good looking.
Hey, Mank. Hey, Linda. Come over and join us. No, I'm just gonna take a little walk. Okay. Be back soon.
Come on, boy. You gonna get that whooping.
Give him that lifting punch, baby! Yes!
Now, see, the thing about him, man, he stays on his toes. Nobody moves like him. He just dances. He floats. All right, come on, guys. Come on, guys.
That's what you want. That's right.
I don't know why you're mad at me. Okay, I'm not the only one who didn't believe it. If you have a reputation for sleeping around, then maybe people aren't gonna believe you when you say something's happened. I mean, it's crying wolf.
You thought I was crying wolf?
Someone from the crowd shouts.
A guy somewhere in the crowd shouts. Someone in the crowd shouted.
Take the hill!
The street name for chloroacetone phenol is tear gas.
So we'll start with some general questions and then some specific ones for each movie and producer. But please feel free to dialogue with each other by raising your hands or just jumping in. Here we go. This year's movies, whether intentionally or not, ended up reflecting the serious realities of our collective past year. A vast majority dealt with specific political themes, a shocking amount really. 7 were about or inspired by real people. Judas and the Black Messiah, The Trial of the Chicago 7, Nomadland, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, One Night in Miami, Mank, and Minari. 2 were about fictional people who faced very real problems and used film to create a tone that expressed both reality and a heightened reality at the same time. Quite a feat. Sound of Metal and Promising Young Woman. And 1 co-starred someone who definitely should not be real, but unfortunately for all of us is, obviously Rudy Giuliani in Borat's subsequent movie film. What all these movies shared, however, was their daring boldness of subject matter and more of a search for meaning than just a path to escapism. And what they also share are a slew of acting triumphs, some of the best performances I think any of us have ever seen. The PGA has promised to make diversity a priority. 3 of the films were directed by women, 4 were directed by people of color, 3 were produced by people of color. Last year, 2 films were directed and produced by people of color, and only 1 was directed by a woman. So, bravo. Would also like to add that for a club that is considered impossible to get into, 3 were directed by first-time directors. Double congratulations, amazing. And that's why I think we have the variation and the personal views and visions that we have in each movie. Okay, let's begin with something fun. Something that is always a constant in the producing experience. I would like to ask each one of you, what was the hardest, worst, and most miserable part of either making your film or in getting it made? I'll call on you. Charles.
I get to be first up. I would say one of the most challenging or the hardest things we dealt with was the balance between the fictionalized aspects of Chairman Fred Hampton's life, and so that this could still be a compelling movie that people would really want to sit through, while also balancing the truth of the actual events and having Chairman Fred Hampton's son, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., on set with us at Video Village for 41 days, who could not have been more, obviously, very connected to the subject matter. It was a challenge, but it was also a blessing all at the same time.
Got it. Ashley.
I think maybe for us, creatively, it was probably balancing the tone of the film. I think Emerald felt really strongly about incorporating a lot of humor in the movie, but the subject matter and dealing with sexual assault is also very serious, but the way people experience it in their lives is much more complicated. And she wanted something that would be, we all did, sort of funny and warm and inviting and unexpected, and navigating all those tonal turns and ending up with an ending for Cassie that felt just right. That was a big and very cool creative challenge, I think, managing that tone.
Imagine. Monica.
Oh, wow. Well, every day of production was pretty much the worst. The aftermath of Rudy Giuliani was terrible, editing the movie in 5 weeks because of the pandemic. But really, when we shut down for the pandemic and realizing that we are a documentary style film and we really had to incorporate what was happening in 2020. So making that pivot and then figuring out how to achieve it, going back out first and figuring it out was really massively challenging.
I can't even imagine. Dan. Another
I think for us,
physical feat. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about some of the comparisons between Nomadland and Borat in terms of shooting and live locations. I think that's from a producing perspective, one of the largest challenges of Nomadland is creating a fiction film shoot in a variety of locations that we both did and did not control. But it's not a documentary shoot, it's still a fiction shoot. And so it's really interesting trying to stage action in something like an Amazon warehouse or a beet harvest in Nebraska. One of my favorite locations, Wall Drug in South Dakota. I don't know if anyone's passed through Wall, but it's a unique place. And then obviously another huge challenge is just the experiment of mixing actors and non-performers to create a hybrid story.
Yeah, we're going to ask more details for a lot of these things because obviously you cover a lot of interesting questions that people want to know more about. Marc.
The two greatest challenges. First was getting the movie made. Trial Chicago 7 had many starts and stops for a decade. And then the last couple years or last year or two before we started shooting, it was a movie everybody kind of wanted to make, but nobody really wanted to make. And so it got abandoned a number of times. And right before we had scouted, we had cast, plug got pulled a couple of times. And when we finally were able to get it together, it was about 6 weeks prior to shooting. So the challenge of accelerating into production with very limited sources and resources, that was probably the greatest challenge. And then having to produce the film with limited resources, particularly the larger sequences that without the protests, et cetera, there really was no film. So finding ways to accomplish that in the most resourceful and surgical way, that was a great challenge as well.
Daunting. Sacha.
Well, I'm gonna meet Marc there. I think it was not really the craft for us. It was really the financing of it all. We had few partners that fell through and were able to secure financing only 2.5 weeks before our principal photography. So it was really stressful. And then during the making of the film was to be, as Marc was saying, the most efficient possible with the limited resources we had. But Darry's vision was so intentional that I think the craft, when we were making it, I would say really financing the movie was the hardest part of making the film, for sure. Yeah.
Jess.
Well, it's probably about exactly a year ago when we had 3 more scenes left of our film to shoot, and the world shut down. And we were an independent film with no distribution. And so there was definitely a moment of like, what do we do now? Are we like, how long is this pandemic gonna last? Should we wait until it's completely over and then come back and then shoot then? It's a timeless story, so maybe we should just wait it out. But obviously after the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor killings, we all got on the phone. It was me, Regina Kemp, and Jody and Keith. And we said that even though the logical move might have been to like continue to wait, we felt like we couldn't wait, and we had to be one of the first, if not the first, films to get back in. And so when we were back in production in July, we were at the time the largest film that had ever started up again in Los Angeles. And so there was just a lot of pressure of a lot of like every rep came, SAG rep, all the unions came to like warn us and be like, all eyes are on you guys. If anything, occurs, it might be detrimental for the rest of just the industry as a whole. And so try to not have anything bad occur. And then of course, on the first day back, Regina's results actually came back inconclusive. And so we had our entire cast and crew sort of like waiting in the parking lot as we try to test her again. But she, being the amazing human being that she is, the entire time was like, even if it comes back inconclusive again, I don't care. You will FaceTime. I can FaceTime in. This movie is more important, and we will figure it out. And I've never been as close as I was in the last like 3 months of making this film with all of my collaborators, as they all came together with a sense of urgency to try to get this film made and get it done, even though it might not have made the most financial, logical sense at the time. I think we all felt that the message of the film just needed to get out there.
That is inspiring on every level.
Oh, thank you.
I think I'll stop complaining about just having a rainy day. Amazing feat. Ceán.
Well, some people who know me know I look at this as the glass half full if you get to make a movie at all. I feel always enormously grateful for getting to make something. And I know that it doesn't matter what you're making, everyone works really hard. And I always try to keep perspective on that. And so, however, living with my partner who's had this film in his head for 27 years, You know, I guess some people would describe that as hard, trying to get your movie made for 27 years. But, you know, I don't look at it, you know, it's just so wonderful when it happens that you're just so grateful. You just keep moving forward. It was tough because it was kind of in a way, when you get given that gift after 27 years, maybe Marc feels the same way of getting to make something that no one really wanted to make. And Netflix steps up and says, yeah, we'll make this. And literally I'm sorry, what did you say? And you're so surprised. So I think in a weird way, it kind of makes it, you worry more because someone stepped up and said, and maybe everyone feels that way because kind of in a way, everyone's movies here are not the slam dunk, you know, easy to finance. But perhaps we feel more inclined to be so grateful that makes it more challenging because you care about even more because you need to kind of make sure your parents are happy when you're done.
Were they?
You know, they say they are, you know, I mean, they're stuck with it, you know, the baby's born, here it is, you got it. It's here for life. So we hope so, we think so.
Todd?
Well, first of all, Ceán put beautifully. I think it's amazing that every single one of these films got made, all tough, every single one of them tough and admirable and important. So I do take my hat off to every single one of you guys. I know it is hard to get any movie made, particularly this batch of films, which were so good and so important, I think, and emotional and entertaining and all those things. I would say for me and for Denzel, the hardest part was moving it from one studio to another. And thank God for Netflix, Ceán, I agree with you. Ted Sarandos and Scott Stuber were unbelievably gracious and helpful and basically said, go make the movie you want to make. And then the other part of that really, which is the case with all the August Wilson material, because we're doing all of them, is staying true to August Wilson while also making it a theatrical experience. And, you know, battling yourself, at least for me, of trying not to make it something that it doesn't want to be. So I would say that for me is the biggest challenge on producing Ma Rainey's is letting it be what it wants to be while still making it theatrical. And I think George and Denzel and myself, along with our cast and crew, really pulled that off.
I will put an asterisk. Everybody wanted to see Borat's subsequent film.
Yeah,
everybody. So
agree.
No one had the sense to give them money, but I don't know anyone who didn't want to see a sequel to Borat.
Thank you.
I want to just, I think Todd said it great, and I think you all have said it great, which is that the subject matters that people chose to make, the passion projects, that people persevered during COVID, during the no financing, during just the normal travails of putting together any movie. I always say it's a miracle that any movie can ever get made, period, and then to be made well, and for these movies to make their way through so many extra hurdles. Thank you, because the audiences have really appreciated being able to see content like this, and also the spirit of producing, of being able to sort of, my family makes fun of me for saying a no is just a delayed yes. You just have to figure out how to ask the question a different way to a different person, perhaps. But you guys must have heard no so many times, and it didn't stop you. So that's what producers do. They make magic when it doesn't exist, and you guys should all be really proud of what you pulled off. So I'm going to talk about the movie first that everyone knew they wanted to see. Monica, what the hell? How did you pull it off? We all needed the laugh. It was a movie that everybody rushed to see. What is your secret sauce in general and specifically? How much is pre-written? How much improvisation is there on your sets? Did he really wear bulletproof vests at the risk of being discovered, what was the scariest moment? How do you manage to get away with it with him not being recognized? Just tell us how you do it, because we all want to know.
Well, it's funny. We actually all received bulletproof vests after Bruno, because that was a very dangerous film. So I think he probably just put an insert into that bulletproof vest. It was a gift from the studio, actually, at the end of that movie. I think that after midterms, Sacha called me and said, or around midterms, he just said, I'm thinking of doing another Borat movie. And I was like, that's insane. Nobody wants to see that. It's not going to, work. But I think everything that was happening in the world, and 2020 in particular, I think it was just time, and people did need to laugh. And it was, very welcome to have a comedy come out. And at the same time, we were tackling Trumpism and feminism and all those things that also were very present. And we wanted to make sure it came out before the election and ended with, please vote. So how did we do it? I mean, it's a long process. I, produced both Borat and Bruno, the first two movies as well. And it's a very complicated process. But, we, gosh, you asked so many questions. Tell me, ultimately, we just need to get this movie made, and we just go, it's an outline. It starts with an outline. It's an idea. It's a germ of an idea, and it evolves. And as we, and then our incredible production team, has to, and field team have to go out and find people that match these descriptions. And the scenes are not necessarily written out, but I mean, there was like this great table read before we started sometime in 2019 where everybody's like, oh, so it's a scripted movie. This is amazing. And we're like, no, this is, we're going to find people that will say this. We're like, that's never going to happen. You are never going to make that movie. And, obviously it became, now that was our task to now go find this amazing actress that could go toe to toe with Sacha, which is a really tall order. And we found her in a small town in Bulgaria, and she just happened to self-tape after a graduation party. And it was just strange enough that we all kept going back to that self-tape and saying, maybe. And so anyway, they write these scenes, they improvise and talk through it and figure out, like, if I say this, how would somebody respond, a normal person? Or, they would look at tape, a pre-tape of this person in the field and try to figure out how they would respond and come up with scenarios. And our script is probably about 1,000 pages if you really put it all together, because there's all these different scenarios and all these different lines that Sacha and Maria are thinking about as they walk in. And we get one take. You get one take with these people. So you walk in, you go in, we film it, and we hope we get the scene. And if we don't, we have to try to find somebody else that kind of matches for that, or pivot and come up with a new idea. Everything we shot after COVID was a whole new way of getting to the story points that we needed to hit. So, the rally came from us saying, okay, how are we going to put 2020 into the movie? And the brilliant idea came that he's going to be in lockdown, whose biggest nightmare would be to isolate and quarantine with Borat. So that's really, what we did. And that's how the story evolved. So, and then I don't know what else you asked, but it was, it's a difficult process. And the Rudy, I brought this up, but the Rudy thing, that aftermath, the legal issues that come into play are really massive and are a big part of our jobs as we go through the process, because we have to make sure that we're legally always on the right side of the law. It doesn't mean that people can't accuse us of things or call the police, or, on the first movie, I was in jail for 19 hours. I mean, I was arrested along with the first AD, so things happen. So we have to make sure that we're legally on the right side of things.
Is he suing you now?
Rudy, no, because we didn't do anything. He tried to He's claimed that we were trying to extort him at the time, which we weren't extorting him for anything. We didn't ask for a thing. But when he got all freaked out, when, you know, Sacha ran into the room and he ran out, he called all of his New York City cops and said extortion, which was a federal crime. Very smart to bring that up. And it was a really stressful time that evening because the hotel wouldn't let us take anything out of the rooms. They locked us out of the rooms. We all had to, you know, the crew had to exit quickly. And we ended up, you know, confabbing with our lawyers. And, you know, I called everybody, I called the production team and said, let's get everybody to New Jersey tonight. And it was 11 o'clock at night, picked up everybody in the middle of COVID. And, you know, our production team moved everybody to the other state so that in case, because we knew they knew where we were. And I didn't want a repeat of what happened to me on the first movie happening to the entire crew.
That is so awesome. Did you take your cards? Did you take your data?
Did I what?
Did you get your data out of the room? Was the first thing in your mind, let me get the cards out of the camera? And
yeah, no, that's always out first. I mean, we would hide tapes in our pants. You know, there's always been, you know, ways to get out of, to make sure that we got out the data, but then it was just the equipment. So we did have to, you know, we had to shoot the next day to keep going before we went to Romania. So we actually had to rent new equipment. I mean, it was a whole shuffle to make it happen. But yeah, we finally got the equipment out sort of at the end of the next day.
PGA staff, can we please make sure that we film this? And when people say, well, I don't understand, what do producers do? Maybe we can play this back.
You do almost anything.
Yeah. All I can say is, wow, it was worth it for us. I hope it was worth it.
You know, it was. We honestly, we finished shooting. I mean, we had a lot of COVID close calls. Sacha had to be sent out of, and our DPs had to be taken out of Romania. We had to finish the rest of it on a green screen, all the Kazakhstan stuff, because he was exposed to COVID there. It was pretty touch and go whether we were going to deliver this movie on time, but Amazon came in and saved the day and said, all right, yeah, 3-week delivery, we'll do it, we'll make it happen. And, you know, we did.
Amazing. Charles, what a force you are in bringing African-American and diverse voices and faces to the screen, both in front of and behind the camera. Congratulations on making such a huge impact the way you do. You mentioned Fred Hampton's son being on the set, which was obviously interesting and I'm sure instructional and also a little scary. And you mentioned the liberties that you had to take to try to make it dramatic and yet also feel true. And I'm sure the pressure of doing right by the Hamptons and the whole Black Panther movement was wearing on you every minute. Are there anything that you feel comfortable talking about that are liberties that you took from the truth for dramatic license and how you made those decisions and what the reaction was?
Well, yeah, first off, on behalf of the other producers, it's Ryan Coogler, Shaka King, and myself, I'd say the bulk of what's portrayed in the film is historically accurate. And yes, there was a fine line and a balance. We spent a good year or so getting to know Chairman Fred Hampton's family and hoping to get their approval and their blessing to make the movie. And that included not only getting to know the family, but also their comrades, members of the Black Panther Party. And so it was a long process. And so fortunately, I think it was on day 7, they chose to join us as creative, as consultants, cultural experts on the film. And so, yes, they were there with us at Video Village, and not only Chairman Fred Hampton, but a few times Deborah Johnson in the movie, who we know as Mama Akua, who's portrayed in the film. She also came and visited several times. So yes, there was absolutely the pressure to get the story right, to make sure that the historical perspective of the work that he was doing, but also the larger, the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, but as well as the Black Panther Party in general, because so much of history and what's been in books and even in textbooks wasn't accurate. And so there was that overriding mission for us to make sure we got that right. And I would say some of the creative license that was taken. There were a few names that were changed of some of the members of the chapter that were portrayed. There were a few people that did not want to be portrayed in the film. And then there were the family members who didn't necessarily want to have that spotlight that was shining on them. And there were a few characters that were a blend of a few real people. But I'd say beyond that, the majority of what's portrayed in the film was from, at least from the family and from lots of our conversations, was historically accurate. But the things that weren't, what we had to do was every single moment when we would be navigating between the family and our amazing filmmaker, Shaka King, when certain things were not necessarily portrayed the way that they thought that they were historically accurate, we would have to do a thing where he would say, put it on the record. And so we would have this long list of what was on the record by the time we finished the movie. And so what we agreed upon with our consultants on this, with the family, was we would have a complimentary podcast that would come out around the same time as the film, where people could go on the record who wanted to really know more history in a deeper context and detail of the party and Chairman Fred Hampton and what was happening, and they could listen to the podcast. And it was a podcast we did with Elvis Mitchell was the narrator, along with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., so they could go deeper into it, to get into the context of where there may have been some fictionalization with what we portrayed in the film.
What a smart idea, and what an accomplishment to have this exist in the world the way it does now. And with the actors, congratulations on all the nominations, but to have them be able to deliver those speeches so people who had never knew about them could find out. And
Absolutely.
Marc, I know you had some, well, thank you. Marc, I know you had similar problems both in getting the movie made and obviously in dealing with the truth versus when you have to take liberties. I just want to first ask you, did you ever consider giving up during that long gestation, or were you always saying, if it's not today, it's going to be next year? How did that work for you?
Well, this project was ignited a decade ago by others, not me. Walter Parks and Laurie McDonald, and there were many different directors on it. And then it went away for a long time. And then the politics in the country changed in the last few years. And it was actually Steven Spielberg who took the script out of the vault, as it were, and said to Aaron, we probably ought to make this now. And then they came to me. And then I started the arduous climb. What was initially a studio movie very quickly became not a studio movie, or part studio movie, part foreign, and then that went away. And then many people came to our aid, and even Monica on this call, she knows, was very helpful to me. Literally had some folks just put money in with no hope of getting it back, because our race, the way Jess said earlier, we wanted the film to come out before the election, and we wanted to get it made. And what's kind of shocking about the trial of Chicago 7, which is kind of a footnote in history, although there's some very famous people in it, a historical footnote. That movie was, we finally made that movie in the fall of 2019. And if you know the film at all, or even the event of the trial, that was made, that film, before George Floyd was killed, before the Black Lives Matter movement, before police brutality became again such an issue in our country, before the insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th, where protesters were incited by the government. Chicago 7 happened in 1968. And so it's kind of a sad commentary how far we all feel we've come. And when I look at the panel today and see some great, wonderful colleagues and some new colleagues and some incredible voices and new voices, and how thrilling that is. It's also kind of sad that the narrative in our country hasn't really changed all that much when you look at it like that. So that's the thing that's struck me the most in this journey. With the making of the film, Aaron did an enormous amount of research back, even when most of those folks aren't alive anymore. Bobby Seale is, Tom Hayden was, and Aaron was able to spend a lot of time with him many years ago. The events of that movie, particularly in the courtroom and in the protest, are all true events. The characters are all true. The portrayal is Aaron's interpretation. My intention was not to make a photograph, it was to make a portrait, but that the events are true. So Aaron, and that's always the great balance, as Charles said, and Aaron likes to entertain as much as he likes and insist upon being historically accurate. And so the events are, there's a scene where Abby Hoffman runs into the prosecutor. That's a fictionalized scene, but everything in the courtroom, those events are all actual events that occurred. Sometimes time frames were conflated. Bobby Seale was actually gagged for 4 days in the actual trial. It was conflated into one, again, for dramatic purposes, as sometimes you do, as Charles pointed out. What was kind of interesting, just because we're talking about Borat, is that Sacha is a great improvisational actor, and he loves that world. Aaron Sorkin is a playwright, and if you know playwrights, before he became a screenwriter, playwrights, the word is sacred, and all playwright really cares about is that his, her, or their words are really specific. So that was an interesting ongoing conversation, maybe every single day, about the words on the script and the words and impulses that Sacha had. Of course, it all worked out pretty well. So that's Chicago 7.
It worked out great. Christina, I did something terrible. I totally love your movie, but I must love it so much that I forgot to ask you, what was the most terrible, horrible part of it? So you can start with that, or you can start with more positive questions if you don't have a funny answer about that you want. Anyway, I apologize. I don't know how I did that.
No worries.
So if you want to start with what was hard about it, or if you want to start with the fact that I've watched Alan Kim's reaction to being nominated at least 10 times. And if anybody hasn't seen it, Google it immediately when you leave here, because the joy, we've talked about the difficulties of making a movie and the hardships and the challenges, the dehumanizing moments, the degradation that producers have to go through. Watching that kid get his nomination is partly why we all do it. But anyway, so why don't you tell us a little bit? I also want to just say, how long have you known Lee, and how did the rest of us never hear of him before? He's a brilliant director. So can you talk a little bit about what was the hardest part about making the movie? And that can be any version of that. And then B, just a little bit how it came together. And then I'd also love to hear, I think we all would, about how much time the family spent together, because they seem so much like a real family. And we also want to know how you found that little kid and what his relationship with his grandmother in the movie really was like. So go take it.
Okay, I'll try to remember every single one.
Or whatever else you want to say.
First of all, it's like an honor to be amongst such great producing body. I've like come up through this industry admiring a lot of you guys. This is like a dream come true for me. One of the most challenging things is we put this film together very quickly, so we had very little prep time. I think I read the script in February, we were prepping by June, and then we premiered at Sundance the following January. So it had been less than a year since I met Lee Isaac and we premiered, which was like, it was a culmination of just loving the material so much, his material being really well written, and having a very supportive team behind me. Dee Dee and Jeremy are like the most supportive partners I could ever ask for. They never questioned why I wanted to make it. They were like, if you love it, let's figure out how to do this. A24 have also been amazing partners in just being like, this is amazing. What do you need? And let's get you guys wherever you need to go. So it was challenging, but also when you have support from people, anything challenging can be like you can get through it. It was incredibly hot when we got there. We went through this crazy heat wave. I would say that was one of the greatest challenges on set. Poor little Alan would be like sweating all the time. I felt really bad for him, but it was like 100+ degrees. We're shooting in an actual period appropriate like trailer home, which came with also very period air conditioning units that didn't work. So we had to quickly scramble, but all those challenges it was, nothing could really faze us because we all really, really believed in what we were doing. So that's kind of one of the most challenging things. How I came across Lee Isaac is Stephen Yun and I had become friends through making Okja together. And we were just hanging out one day and he was like, hey, have you heard about this script? And I had to admit that I didn't. And he was telling me about it and I was like, okay, I'll definitely take a look. I think post Okja, you know, I got sent a lot of Asian stories, which were all really important, but sometimes I just didn't know if I was the right person to tell it or how I would be additive in that situation. And I think as producers, sometimes we have to exercise like are like, oh yeah, I want to do that, or like, should I do that, or, you know, giving space to other people's to tell those stories. So in that regard, when he sent this script, though, I read it and I connected to it on such a human and emotional level. And it came at a point in my life where, as like a child of immigrants, I think I was like starting to like understand what that meant to me. Like, I think for my whole life, I was born in America, but grew up with Korean parents and just like kind of didn't know, like I straddled the line of Asian or American. And, you know, you always have to do that balance. Sometimes you have a foot on the American side, or sometimes you have a foot on the Asian side, and you're not quite sure where you fit in. But I read this and was like, whoa, I've never felt so connected to a story. And that was, we read it, and then I Skyped with him because he was in Korea at the time. I was Skyping before it was cool to Skype. It was kind of like this kismet, wonderful thing that happened that I don't think I could ever replicate again. It was, I also had like met a lot of people prior that I felt like in a weird sort of kismet way, I had met them so that I could use them on this film or work together with them on this film. That's our editor, Harry Yoon, Emil Mosseri, our amazing composer, Lachlan Milne, our amazing cinematographer, was someone who I had wanted to work with. So that's kind of how the project came together. In terms of little Alan, when we started casting, and you know, we had a very short window to cast because the project came together so quickly. And one of the things that Isaac and I, we were like, this is really important, is we have to find a kid who's fully bilingual. So knowing that, we hired a casting director who is also bilingual, whom I had worked with before, Julia Kim, who's lovely and has an ear to really hear, you know, an understanding of language. She went through crazy unorthodox ways of casting, really grassroots, going to Korean churches and after school programs. And the thing that was important to us was like, we need a kid who, even after he serves his grandma a cup of tea, that we're still gonna like love him and root for him. And when we saw his tape, we were like, do you think this is, I think this is the kid. I think this is the kid. And so we met with him and had a little chem reading with Stephen, and he's continued to like blow us away. Everyone should watch his Critics' Choice Award acceptance, which I can't watch without tearing up.
Oh, that's maybe what I was referring to. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, I want to watch him forever. He's really great.
So cute.
Dan, what an inventive, original, and moving movie. How did this come to be? When did you discover the book and decide you wanted to do it? What was the process of figuring out how you could do it? And what point did Chloe Zhao become the director? And then I think we all just want to ask you, honestly, how you made it. So take it away.
Sure. You know, I came to the process kind of in the middle and very close to shooting. The project originates with Peter Spears, the producer of the film. And Peter and Frances had been working together for a while. And Peter brought Fran, Jessica Bruder's amazing book, Nomadland. And Peter and Fran decided to link up. And then I know that Fran saw The Rider in theaters at a film festival and really thought, like a lot of us, that it was a spectacular American movie. And then they approached Chloe about doing the project together, and Chloe really responded to it. And Chloe brought a key innovation, which is the idea of creating this amalgam character of Fern, which Fran plays. And then Fran and Chloe ended up collaborating in the creating of that character. And so that was the genesis of it. And then Chloe approached me about participating in the film because I had experience working on somewhat larger scale productions that mixed large scale resources and complex production plans with non-professional performers. And I think for all of us, working in a hybrid way with established actors and non-professionals was new. So, and the team was also included Molly Asher, who had produced Chloe's first 2 films. And obviously Chloe also came to the table with Josh Richards, her cinematographer and creative partner, and they had done their first 2 films together as well. And what was interesting about the early phases of that's kind of the backstory of how we all got there. Then what was really interesting about the process was the level of risk involved in terms of where we were starting. So we kind of pitched, we pitched an approach or a process of movie making that had a tremendous amount of risk built into it. And we were very upfront about it. We said, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, and this is how we're going to approach it. And then Chloe went and did a tremendous amount of research and cast Linda May, Swanky, and Bob Wells, who are all featured in the book. We were able to work with Jessica on creating those relationships and bridging the book with our movie. And we started, she started doing those research trips in the spring of 2018. And then kind of like Christina's project, we were shooting very quickly. We started shooting in South Dakota in September of 2018 and was prepping in August for that. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And the panel is kind of getting me thinking about how risky it was for the studio to sign up for the project and how they didn't seem to blink at what we were doing, which was really empowering. They said, we trust Chloe and Francis and the producing team to go and make a great movie. So that was a remarkable aspect of it, is how much leeway we had to experiment with actual movie making processes. And a lot of it was new for everyone involved, I'd say.
It's an amazing accomplishment on every creative, practical, mechanical, artistic, and spiritual level. So, Ceán, okay, you win the prize of the longest gestation. How did you end up making it now? And did it end up resembling the original script that you started off as your inspiration? That's question 1. And question 2 is, I think we all know that David Fincher is famous for his meticulous style and design. And this movie is so gorgeous in its black and white. And did shooting it in black and white change the production design, the costumes, or anything else? But first, let's talk about how it sort of, over 27 years, how much did it change? Or I'm very curious about that, and then some of the technical stuff of how you made it seem so authentically old.
You know, it's a better film being made now than it would have been 27 years ago. And we can probably all say things like that, I guess. I do think that, David learned more. Of course, he increased his skill level as the years went on. And I think this film needed that. It's such an interweaving of time and story that was kind of complicated. And looking back on it, I just started working with David then, and it's better that it got made now for this particular director, that it took this time for him to learn what to do and what not to do. It did change a little bit, not a lot, but the beginning and the end of the movie is not what had been written for years. It was going to open with Joe and Mank as little boys and close with that as well. And uncharacteristically with David, we rarely have anything end up on the editing floor. We did shoot them and cut those scenes, and that's unusual. around here. What was the second question?
It was about the black and white and how and the style of the sound and the black and white and
Exciting to get to shoot black and white.
I know he's been wanting to do that a long time because we made a little stab at that.
We did, with the best music that was ever going to be made.
It was someday.
Yeah, someday. Coming from a photography background, so excited to get to shoot black and white. I didn't care, I didn't care what it was. It's just so exciting. But it evolved, back when before it was going to be, we'd found this film in Eastern Europe and was going to be this stock that we had to pull out, and you can only get it done at certain labs. And we I think it's always been in the back of David's mind. Benjamin Button is the same thing. We'd take a commercial and he'd test out face replacement. We always had this kind of testing process that we do through other mediums. Like I forget, we had it was a shoot for Calvin Klein with Rooney, and Red made him a camera for that in black and white. I think in his mind, he always knew that it was leading towards Mank, knowing David. And then shot also a music video with that same black and white sensor. So that was, over years of trying to kind of perfect that. Quite honestly, it came out so well. There's very little change in what Red delivered to David. It was fun, and it was pretty simple now. David said, take your iPhone, put it on noir, and everyone shoot their costumes that way, do their tests that way, do the makeup, do the lipsticks, do all of that. So you can start to see what is in black and white that reads, because, it's, red lipstick can go black. And I think it was really fun for everybody. I think it's, that's kind of exciting. Probably never get that chance again in our careers.
It turned out fantastic, that's for sure.
Yeah, Messerschmidt is our gaffer on Gone Girl, and I was kind of like Christina said, you kind of like say, oh, okay, who's this person I really want to work with? You start building teams, and he became a DP on Mindhunter, and he's great. He's technical, super smart, funny, and really talented. So we got the whole package with him.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Does it feel like a monkey is off your back?
It does.
Ashley, your film is so bold, so original and vibrant. Its playful look belies the seriousness of the themes in such an interesting way, and you blended so many different genres, which is always a hard thing to accomplish, especially with a first-time female director. It's like if you say everything hard and then put it in one movie and then say, now try to get this made. I know you're a financing company too, which probably made it a little bit easier. But I wanted to ask you, was there any special time when you realized it was all going to work? Because there were so many different challenging aspects to it creatively. Were all those apparent from the very beginning? And B, when did you sort of say, stop having to clench, or did you never?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there were a few moments in the process. Honestly, one of them was the very first meeting that we had with Emerald. We'd read the script, and then Josie McNamara and Emerald Tennell came in to sit down with me and Ben and talk through the project. And Emerald, in that first meeting, and this has happened very few times in my experience, sat down and pitched out exactly what the movie was, tonally, musically, in terms of the character, in terms of the humor. She had such a very specific and clear vision. And as we got into prep, you could see it in, it was the textures of Cassie's sweaters. It was the, musical reference. It was the certain colors of pink. It was everything. And so we were really, really taken by her vision from the start. And we knew that she was really onto something, and she had an incredibly confident point of view, which was very special, particularly for a first-time filmmaker. And then, of course, it was a process of finding all of these elements, bringing together our crew who could execute them very specifically for Emerald. And then, in post too, and I mentioned sort of walking the line of tone, it was definitely a process of sort of fitting all of those pieces together. The ending I mentioned was particularly tricky because it's cathartic and it's triumphant and it's funny, but it's deeply, deeply tragic at the same time. And I think Emerald's whole reason for making the movie was in the sort of cathartic juxtaposition of those elements, because it's supposed to be this sort of shock to the system that wakes you up and makes you look at your own behavior and your own life. And we've got an incredible response from people who felt comfortable sharing stories and revisiting things that they had kind of buried in their past, because of this very, very particular specific ride that the movie takes you on. So I think, for me, in terms of knowing when the tone was going to work and when all of those elements were going to gel together, it was really a combination of remembering that very first meeting and then probably the Sundance premiere when we finally got to see it, with a big audience for the first time. And there was that moment where Carey Mulligan, sits up and asks Adam Brody what he's doing, and the whole audience sort of like leaned in, and it was so tense. And then we cut to, the colors of the coffee shop and the Charlie XCX music is coming in, and all of a sudden, sort of all of those elements together, people are laughing and warming up and feeling permission to laugh. And we kind of knew that it was working. You could really feel it in the energy of the audience. I'm really glad we got to have that experience. That was very special, obviously, because the way that people have been experiencing the movie is more at home. And with COVID, even that, knowing how people were going to respond to the tone watching it alone versus in theaters, as that whole conversation evolved and as the release plan for the movie evolved, I think that was part of it too. But it's somehow bookended, I think, by the first meeting and the Sundance premiere were the moments when we thought, okay, she's really got it, and it's really resonating with people in terms of the laughter and the tears and all of those elements that she ties together.
How great you got to see it with an audience. That's,
I know, a real treat, something that we all took for granted until this past year, but really a special experience for sure.
in terms of the cast, obviously Carey gives the performance of her career. What point was she attached, and was she involved in creating her own look? Was that all Emerald from the beginning?
Yeah, so she got involved. Our process was pretty quick. We had that first meeting with Josie and Emerald in October, and we were shooting the following March. And Carey got involved maybe in January. So it was all pretty quick, and we were on an incredibly tight timeline making the movie for a lot of reasons, including the fact that Emerald, hero among women, was 7 months pregnant shooting this movie. So Carey had gotten involved a couple months before we started shooting, and she and Emerald really, really connected about this character. Emerald always had her in mind. And I know that they had a lot of conversations, and we all did about Cassie and about her look and about her humor and about her energy. And so I think that Emerald had that character very clearly in her mind when she read the script, and she was so vibrant on the page even. But then once Carey came on board, and knowing that Emerald kind of had her in mind, it was something that they, sort of continued to create and evolve together. Obviously, it's inspired by so many personal experiences too for all of us who worked on the movie and for all the women who worked on the movie. So it was a really cool collaborative process in that way.
The accomplishment of having it be entertaining while it still dealt with so many devastating issues is like the best of what cinema can accomplish. So that's amazing. Todd.
Thank you.
You've had such a strong and successful relationship with Denzel and with August Wilson's work. What were the elements of the play that you felt were most essential to keep in the film, and what were the hardest parts to convey on the screen? Oh, you're muted. Todd is muted.
There's a lot of dialogue, and it's funny, Marc. I was listening to, because I'm starting to work with Aaron on Monday. We're doing the Lucille Ball.
Sure.
So I'm dealing with dialogue and a playwright all over again, which is really interesting because, to your point, Marc, and to your question, Lucy, when you're dealing with a playwright and you're putting it onto film, it really is about the words, and every word counts. So our biggest challenge really was making sure that the long monologues that Chadwick had, or that the other characters had, really had a flow to it. Because it's one thing when you're doing it on stage, it's another thing when you're doing it for cinema, for film. And there's a rhythm and a pacing that August writes to. And then there's a pacing that an audience comes to expect. So it's a real challenge. And I think George Wolfe, our director, did an unbelievable job, at least to me, he did. And, where he was able to figure out the rhythm of the film and when to, I think the only thing we really did was we moved a monologue or two around, but otherwise we pretty much shot what was written in order and told the story that way. So it is a challenge for sure to kind of stay true to the story that August wrote while making sure the rhythm for a movie is working for an audience. And that really was the same thing with Fences as well. And we're going to do the piano lesson next. So it's always a challenge, again, with great writing, great playwriting, and trying to get it into a theatrical form and keeping the rhythms, if you will. That's really the biggest thing I would say.
Thank you. Sacha, what an intense movie. I felt I was going deaf myself, and it was as experiential a movie as you could possibly have. I think maybe even watching it, I did watch it actually alone, made it even more intense. I don't know what it's like in a theater, and maybe you don't either, but I can tell you that watching it made me see deafness in a whole different way. And also I know many or all of these movies had, hard times getting finance, but this one is a low budget film from a first time filmmaker with a very tough subject matter that didn't have a distributor and that managed to make it into the award seasons by sheer excellence. So congratulations. So how difficult was it? I know that we're a little bit short on time, but I do want to know, like, how much did you know about the deaf community before? How did you get with Darius Marder, who obviously is brilliant? And when did you attach Riz? And challenges of shooting in a deaf community. Can you just free associate whatever you want to about that? There's so many steps to climb that you climbed.
I'll try to make it short, so I'm going to do it chronologically. And we shot everything chronologically. I think everything was very important for us to do it in order. Darius started writing 13 years ago, and he tried to make the movie 4 years prior to meeting him. And I met him 3 years before the first day of principal photography. So he had many financiers promising him the moon and giving him price tag on his project. And we knew, Bert and I, that no one would really finance this movie at this price because we were kind of used to the market and to the reality of things. And there are a lot of people in this industry that just want to tag along artists, but not really grind. And so we just realized that all of these people promising him the moon would not make the movie. So we went back to the script, we broke it down, we rebudgeted it. I did it myself. And then went back to the line producer who made the prior budget. We had a creative conversation about execution. He was convinced after that he could do it for less. And I told it, and we very explicitly told him that for that price, the movie will never be made. So this is when we put a more realistic price tag to the movie, and then trying to gear up for pre-production and raise the money. It was still really hard, but Caviar started jumpstart the project by financing pre-production, hoping we would find a solution. It was very risky. I would not advise any producer to do that. But we were we were convinced by Darius' vision. He sold it to us with so much conviction, and his vision was so precise. He used to be an editor himself, so the whole edit of the film was in his mind. The performance, he was so deeply involved in the characters. He wrote side scripts about characters. The characters of Lou had a whole 100-page script for her, just as a side story, things we would not see on screen. So there were no doubt for the producers and that the vision was so strong. So it was really, the challenge was to put it together and find the right financiers. And we failed at it, to be honest with you. It was so hard. And 2.5 weeks prior to the shoot, we got rid of the financier we had. I have $500 in a bank account. I was 50 people working in a production office, and I was just not feeling very great. And we had this guy that Darius knew, who's not really a film financier, but a guy that was very successful in his professional life and who also believed in his vision. And it's kind of a dream Hollywood story. Just went in 24 hours without a deal and fully financed our film. Just to answer your question about Riz came on a year prior to the first day of principal, but we thought that we would shoot before that, but we had to push. And also he had to train. That was very important for Darius, that everything we do, we try to do it as authentic as humanly possible. So everything you see on screen has been recorded like live, like a concert. We did not rehearse, we did not block any scenes. Riz actually, and the director, could not see dailies for 3/4 of the shoot. This is something we imposed ourselves. I don't know if I would do it again, but it helped focus on execution, on performances. And I think it feels this way when we see the film, that this is very, I think, as authentic as we can. Of course, we cannot fake deafness. So it is something we would not want to do. This is why every deaf character in our film are played by deaf people, except for Paul Racy, who's a coda, so he's a child of deaf adults. He's a part of deaf culture. And we also created implant for Riz for him to lose his hearing that would create white noise. And that's why certain performances are so real. He was not even able to walk straight on set. You had to have help, because when you cannot hear, you lose all of your balance and everything. So yeah, it was really, authenticity was the biggest goal for Darius, and I think he achieved it pretty well.
A triumph. Jess, we haven't forgotten you. What an incredible directorial debut. Were there any challenges in attaching a first-time filmmaker to such an already difficult subject matter in terms of getting it financed? At what point did she come on board? And what was the scariest part of embarking on dealing with so many different legends? I know we've talked to different people about the reality versus the fiction that you need to, well, where you bend the reality to make a point, and you obviously bent it by having them all be together. So can you talk a little bit about the pressures and obstacles of dealing with so many different characters of legendary scope, and also about Regina?
Of course. Well, I think the most important thing for us in making this film about these four legendary icons was to try to make sure that we exposed their vulnerability and their humanity. And so that was like at the first and foremost for all of us from the beginning. And in the search for a director, we just thought that it would be an incredible opportunity to make sure that our director was a Black woman. And so once we made that choice, it really seemed to us the only clear candidate would be a legend like Regina King. We had already known that she had been directing in TV for a while, and I'd watched a lot of her work. And then she, at her Golden Globe speech, I think, did this amazing speech about how important it was for us to, as a community, like really focus on having parody on all of her films. And when she did that, it felt like she was doing exactly what Malcolm X was doing in Kemp's writing. Like she was challenging all of us to do better. And as soon as we saw that speech, we sort of all knew like it could only ever be her. And it was actually quite impressive, I think, for her too, to like, now that I've, you know, it's my first time in this kind of like awards conversation, but like for her, like with Beale Street, I'm sure her schedule was insane. And she still made time in between the Golden Globes and the Oscars to sit down and read the script and read the play. She hunted it down herself. And she was very important for her to carve out time to meet with all of us. And she said that she had been looking for a while for a period film. At that time, it was supposed to be, I think she was looking for a love story. But she said when she read this script that it just felt like a love letter to every Black man. And for her, that was even more of an important story to tell. So it just felt like a very kismet kind of thing. It also ended up that her agent was one of her longest friends. So it's sort of like, felt like a fate kind of thing. Regarding it being about, you know, such important figures, we were lucky enough to have someone like Regina, who, you know, was very important for her to talk to all of the families in making the film. And so like even the clip that was shown at the very start, that's actually Jim Brown's daughter is playing Sonny Liston's wife, cheering him on. And Sam Cooke's granddaughter came down and for a couple of days and just sort of watched, you know, what we were all doing. And then I think the most beautiful scene in the entire film, for me at least, is when Malcolm X calls his daughter, and they have sort of like this treasure hunt kind of thing on the phone. And that scene came directly from a conversation that Regina had with Ambassador Shabazz about like what was it like to have him as a dad. And she mentioned like, you know, like he used to hide things around the house so that whenever he was away, like we would still have like this connection, even though he was far away. And so we all love that anecdote so much that we weaved it into the story. But in terms of whether or not it was a risk for us, we didn't feel like it was, because creatively it just felt like such an obvious right choice.
Well, the movie's fantastic. I feel very sad that our time is up when I'd like to spend about the whole day with you guys. I feel like we're just beginning to touch the surface of not only the content, like I said, of the movies that you guys made, but the difficulty and the perseverance. We all know the producers are unsung because our job is to be as invisible as we can as we support everyone else. But the amount that you guys each had on your shoulders to carry the truth of the movie that you wanted to show and to get them made is exceptional this year. As far as the PGA is concerned, you are all already winners. It doesn't even matter what award you get, but I wish you could all win one because you all deserve it. Thank you so much for being here. I personally hope I get to talk to all of you and know you all better. I'm so impressed, as I can see you are with each other. And one of the benefits of the PGA is that we can actually meet each other more and talk to each other more and learn from each other. So I've learned a lot. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. It's nice to meet you.
I hope I see you every year, like Susan said. Thank you very, very much. Good luck with
Thank you.
everything that you've done and everything that you will do.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Congrats.